Ed Miliband has accused David Cameron of playing games with the future of the UK as a row over the SNP's role in a future government intensifies. The Labour leader said Mr Cameron, who has warned of the dangers of a Labour-SNP tie-up, should be taking on the nationalists, not talking them up. He suggested other Conservatives were ashamed of the election strategy. It comes as former Scottish Secretary Lord Forsyth warned short-term arguments could undermine the Union. The Conservatives will continue their warnings about the prospect of the SNP supporting a minority Labour government in the event of a hung Parliament, with former Prime Minister Sir John Major claiming later that would be a recipe for mayhem. In other election news, Labour would launch an emergency recruitment drive to get 1,000 more nurses into training this year if they win the election. Nick Clegg has said owners of second homes in rural beauty spots could pay double the rate of council tax under Liberal Democrat plans. The Democratic Unionist Party launches its manifesto. The BBC should be cut back to the bone and the licence fee reduced by 2/3, according to UKIP's Nigel Farage. Sir John will use a speech in the Midlands to say a Labour government would be subjected to a daily dose of blackmail from the nationalists. But this approach has reportedly led to disquiet among some Scottish Conservatives, with Lord Forsyth suggesting the party's focus on the SNP could backfire and threaten the integrity of the Union. Mr Miliband, who has ruled out a Labour coalition with the SNP, seized on Lord Forsyth's comments to The Guardian, telling the BBC that Mr Cameron was playing fast and loose with the Union. Mr Cameron's approach risked setting England against Scotland, he told BBC Breakfast, saying that Unionist politicians should be confronting the SNP and its desire for another independence referendum, which he said he was not having. David Cameron should not be talking up a nationalist party in order to try and get them to do well in Scotland to take votes off Labour to try and crawl back into Downing Street, he said. He should be taking on a nationalist party as I am doing. David Cameron is now threatening the integrity of the UK with the games he is playing. With 16 days to polling day, Sir John will say that, in practice, Mr Miliband would be forced to agree to the nationalists' demands or face the collapse of his government. Slowly but surely. If Labour were to accept an offer of support from the SNP, it could put the country on course to a government held to ransom on a vote-by-vote basis, he is expected to say. Labour would be in hock to a party that, slowly but surely, will push them ever further to the left. And who would pay the price for this? We all would. We would all pay for the SNP's ransom in our daily lives, through higher taxes, fewer jobs, and more debt. This is a recipe for mayhem. At the very moment our country needs a strong and stable government, we risk a weak and unstable one, pushed to the left by its allies, and open to a daily dose of political blackmail. Launching her party's manifesto in Edinburgh on Monday, SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon sought to allay the fears of some English voters, insisting they would act responsibly and constructively in the interests of the whole of the UK. Recent polls all point towards there being a hung parliament after May 7, and suggest the SNP could be the third largest party and crucially hold the balance of power. As a consequence of this, the threat of an SNP link-up with Labour has emerged as a major Conservative line of attack in the election campaign. Same drum. But the BBC's deputy political editor James Landale said Sir John has long opposed Scottish nationalism, warning before the 1997 election that voters have 72 hours to save the Union. Almost 20 years on, he is once again banging the same drum, he said. The Conservatives are determined to keep up these warnings to bring any wavering voters back to the Tory fold, our correspondent said. But Labour believes the Conservatives are themselves putting the Union at risk, by acting as cheerleaders for the SNP, he added. It is a view echoed by Lord Forsyth, who told The Guardian newspaper that his party was playing a short-term and dangerous game by building up the SNP. We've had the dilemma for Conservatives, which is they want to be the largest party at Westminster and therefore some see the fact that the nationalists are going to take seats in Scotland will be helpful, he said. But that is a short-term and dangerous view which threatens the integrity of our country. But despite this, Sir John will say that the SNP's driving ambition is an independent Scotland, and it would use its position to demand policies that favour Scotland at the expense of the rest of the UK. That is no way to run a country. And nor is it remotely fair to England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, he will say. But former Liberal Party leader Lord Steele said the Conservatives' arguments were rather odd, given that they had supported a minority SNP administration in the Scottish Parliament between 2007 and 2011. "I have always liked John Major, but I don't think he has ever understood Scotland," he told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. "He didn't when he was Prime Minister and he is taking the same line now." He added, "I think Michael Forsyth is correct that the Tories are really doing the SNP a favour by bringing them to centre stage of the campaign.